Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Today we will be discussing Article 1169. What does Article 1169 say? Those obliged to deliver or to do something incur in delay from the time the obligee judicially or extrajudicially demands from them the fulfillment of their obligation. However, the demand by the creditor shall not be necessary in order that delay may exist when the obligation or the law expressly so declare, or when from the nature and the circumstances of the obligation it appears that the designation of the time when the thing is to be delivered or the service is to be rendered was a controlling motive for the establishment of the contract, or when the demand would be useless as when the obligor has rendered it beyond his power to perform. In reciprocal obligations, neither party incurs in delay if the other does not comply or is not ready to comply in a proper manner with what is incumbent upon him. From the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation, delay by the other begins. There might be words in this provision that you do not understand. We will just underline important words under Article 1169. First, those obliged to deliver. Incur in delay kapag si obligee daw nag-demand na for the fulfillment of their obligation. So, kailan ka in delay? Kapag ka nag-demand na si obligee. However, may instances po that the demand by the creditor is not necessary. What are these instances? First, when the law expressly so declare. Kung ang batas na po ang nagsabing hindi na kailangan ng demand dahil ang batas na po ang nagsabi kung kailan due and demanda mo lang obligation mo. Second, when the designation of time was a controlling motive. Halimbawa, may deadline na sa kontrata ninyo, therefore there is no need to demand. The moment you do not fulfill your obligation, you are already in delay. Third one is, kapag useless na po mag-demand, if the obligor has rendered it beyond his power to perform. Hindi na po kailangang mag-demand kung hindi na po kayang i-fulfill ng obligor. Lastly, in reciprocal obligations, ito yung situation where you are both creditor and debtor of each other. So, nako'y utang kay A 3 pesos, si A napo'y utang sa 4 pesos. That is called a reciprocal obligation. In reciprocal obligation, no party is considered to be in delay if the other does not comply or is not ready to comply. If si A is not ready to pay me the 3 pesos, and I am also not ready to pay the 3 pesos, there is no delay between A and me. But the moment I pay A the obligation of 3 pesos and A does not pay me what he owes me, which is 3 pesos, then A is already in delay. From the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation, delay by the other begins. Now, there are two different kinds of delay. Meron pa tayong ordinary delay and legal delay. What are the differences between the two? When we say ordinary delay, this is merely the failure to perform an obligation on time. So for example, A promised to pay B on March 7. Now, pag si A wala nakabayad kay B on March 7, that is what we call ordinary delay. On the other hand, legal delay or default or mora is failure to perform an obligation on time, which failure consists a breach of obligation. So for example, if A promised to pay B on March 7, nung dumating ang March 7, A did not pay B, and when March 8 came, sabi ni B, "Hoy A, bayaran mo na ako." That is what you call legal delay because there is already a demand. This is your failure to perform an obligation on time, which failure consists of a breach of obligation. In Article 1169, we will be talking about the different kinds of legal delay. And this is what we call mora. We have mora solvendi or the delay of the debtor. We have mora accipiendi or the delay of the creditor. And compensatiomere or delay of both debtor and creditor. When we say mora, unsay pasabot ana, delay, legal delay. So when do you consider the debtor in legal delay? When do you consider the creditor in legal delay? And when do you consider both parties in delay? Again, we will be discussing mora solvendi, and when we say solvendi, that refers to the legal delay of the debtor. Moral accipiendi refers to the legal delay of the creditor, and compensatiomere means delay of both the creditor and the debtor. Say for example, D bought a ref from C. Kasi nagpalit si D. Nagpalit siya og ref dito kang C. C in return promised to deliver the ref on March 7, 2023. Now, who is the creditor here and who is the debtor? So the creditor has a right to demand. So who has the right to demand in this case? Who is also the debtor? The debtor has the legal obligation to do, to give, or not to do. Who is our creditor? Our creditor is D. Therefore, our debtor is C. If C does not deliver the ref on March 7, 2023, C is in ordinary delay even though a period has been fixed. So, hindi po siya legal delay. The law presumes that D is giving an extension to C. Sabon nako, si D nagpalit og ref kang C. Ingon si C, i-deliver na ko ang ref D karong March 7, 2023. Now, when March 7 arrived, and C did not deliver the ref, unsay tawag sa iyang delay? That is ordinary delay. Nga naman, ang law nag-expect or nag-presume nga gihatagan lang ni D o palugit si C to deliver the ref. Is C liable for damages due to delay since nag-promise siya og March 7 pero wa niya gi-deliver og March 7? Liable ba si C for damages due to his ordinary delay? The answer is no, because the general rule is no demand, no delay. What if moingon si D, huy C, di ba March 7 ka mag-deliver? Lapas na kaayo, March 15 na. Palihog kog deliver og March 16. Is there a demand to deliver? Yes, there is already a demand to deliver. Therefore, the general rule which says no demand, no delay is no longer applicable. Question: when is C considered in default? Kanus aba na delay si C? Since ningon naman si D, palihog kog deliver og March 16. Kanus ka mag-count nga in default na si C? Is it March 7, March 16, or March 15? Class, in answering this question, you always go back to the moment when D demanded C to deliver the ref. Sa atong conversation ganiha, kanus ang nag-promise si C? March 7. Pagabot sa March 7, wala niya gi-deliver. Pero niingon si D, palihog kog deliver og March 16. When is C considered in default? Is it March 7? Is it March 15? Or is it March 16? If C will not be able to deliver the ref on March 16, he will be considered in legal delay starting March 16. Who is in delay here? Is it the creditor or the debtor? Kinsa may na obligation to deliver pero wala nag-deliver, who is in delay? Is it the creditor or the debtor? The answer is the debtor. Who is our debtor here? C. Now, in this situation, this is what we call legal delay of the debtor. In other words, sa gani ni siya, mora solvendi. What are the requisites when a debtor is in delay? Kanus aman na ay mora solvendi. What are the requisites when a debtor is in delay? First, the debtor has an obligation. Sa example na to ganiha, unsay obligation ni debtor? That is to deliver the ref. The obligation is determinate, due, and demandable. Is it determinate? Kabalo ba mo sa iyang i-deliver? Yes, a ref. Is it due? Yes, due na. Kasi di ba dapat March 7, pero March 7 wala niya gi-deliver. Is it demandable? Does D have the power to demand the delivery of the ref? Yes, because lampas naman siya. It has not been performed on its maturity date. Kano sa iyang maturity date? March 7. Gi-deliver ba ni C? Wala. Therefore, it has not been performed on its maturity date. There is a judicial or extrajudicial demand by the creditor. Nagdemand ba si D nga i-deliver ang ref? Yes, niyan na siya. Huy, C, March 15 na ron. Ingon ka March 7 ni mo i-deliver. So, palihog kog deliver og March 16. Therefore, there is an extrajudicial demand by the creditor. Is there a failure of the debtor to comply? Kung dili na i-deliver ni C, therefore, he is liable because he is mora solvendi. The debtor is now in legal delay. Therefore, there is failure of the debtor to comply. You always go back to the general rule, class. No demand, no delay. Kung wala ka nag-ingon nga, hoy, i-deliver na, walay delay si debtor. But the moment you demanded, hoy, ambi na ng ref, the delay of the debtor starts. Now, since no demand, no delay is a general rule, kano sa man na exception? Ma'am, kung naingon day ko, I promise to pay on March 17, pero wala man nag-demand ang akong creditor, am I in delay? So there are different exceptions to the general rule which says no demand, no delay. So what are the exemptions when demand of the creditor is not necessary? Kanus aman dili kailangan magdemand si creditor. First, we have when the law declares, kung ang batas mismo na ingon nga dili na kailangan magdemand, when the designation of time was a controlling motive, and when demand is useless, when the obligor has rendered it beyond his power to perform. Now let us take a look at the different examples as to when kanus dili na kinahanglan magdemand ang creditor. We have when the law declares the designation of time was controlling and it is beyond the power of the debtor to perform. Let us go to the first example. So in Lupon, for example, there is a new ordinance entitled Bawal ang Plastic kada Martes. So you are not allowed to use your plastic bottle, your single-use plastic, dili pwede gamiton kada Martes. Now, is there a need to demand every Tuesday that plastics are not allowed on that day? Dili na kinahanglan because the law declares that plastic are not allowed every Tuesday. That is the first exemption. Another, for number 2, when the designation of time was a controlling motive based on the nature and circumstances of the obligation of the parties. For example, X obliged Y to finish her wedding dress on March 7 because her wedding is on March 8. So niingon ka, uy, nang sastre, humana na ako ang wedding gown karong March 7 ha, kay March 8 na ba akong kasal. Is there a need for X to demand from Y the fulfillment of the obligation to finish the wedding dress on March 8? Kailangan ba mo ingon si X, huy Y, March 7 na, humana na ugma. Kailangan ba? No, because the designation of time was a controlling motive. The wedding is on March 8. Kano sa dapat mo man ang wedding gown? Dapat before the wedding, which is March 7. That is what we call the designation of time was a controlling motive. Another one, the last exception, when the demand is useless because the obligor has rendered it beyond his power to perform. Example, X obliged Y to finish her wedding dress on March 7 because her wedding is on March 8. However, Y died on March 6. Kailangan ba mag-demand ni X dito kang Y? Huy, Y, bangon di asimong kamatayon kay humana akong wedding dress? Can X still demand fulfillment from Y? No. Nga naman, because the demand is useless. The obligor has rendered it beyond his power to perform. Kung saan pa man pagkahuman ni Y, nga patay naman siya. That is now the exception of the general rule which says no demand, no delay. Unsay effect sa mora solvendi? What is mora solvendi? That is delay of the debtor. Kung na-delay ang debtor og bayad, unsa may epekto ana? The debtor is liable for damages. So katong may example na to ganiha. Nagdemand na si D nga i-deliver ang ref karong March 16. Pero kung wala nag-deliver ni C, C is liable for damages. If the obligation involves determinate thing, the debtor bears the loss even if it is due to fortuitous event. So for example, ingon si D, huy C, i-deliver na karong March 16 akong ref. Pagka March 16, wala man nag-deliver ni C ang ref. Human naglinog, ang ref natagak na buak. Liable ba si C, who is our debtor in this case? Yes, liable siya, even if the loss is due to a fortuitous event. Unsa pay epekto kung in-delay ang debtor? Pwede na ay rescission or pwede na ay resolution. Rescission or resolution means undangon na to atong kontrata, but debtor is still liable for damages. Ma'am, unsa din ang fortuitous event? Always remember this word because in the succeeding provisions, we will also be discussing fortuitous event. Usually, pag na ay fortuitous event, si debtor dili siya liable for damages. But let us first define what is a fortuitous event. Fortuitous event is otherwise called as force majeure. Unsa man ang force majeure? These are unpredictable events connected with acts of natural forces occurring independently of the debtor's will. Unsa may example ana? Fire, flood, avalanche, lightning strikes, earthquake, subsidence or landslide, explosion, crash of an aircraft, volcanic eruption, and tornado. So for example, wala na deliver ni C ang ref on March 16 because unsay nahitabo na earthquake. Is C liable? The answer is yes. Liable gihapon siya. Why? In delay naman siya. Remember, if the obligation involves determinate thing, the debtor bears the loss even if it is due to a fortuitous event. Ang fortuitous event class, mao ni siya ang mga panghitabo sa atong kinabuhi nga wala nato gi-expect. So for example, fire, natulog ka, ang ref nasunog. Kabalo ba ka nga masunog? Of course, kung wala ka kabalo nga masunog, daig ka, that is what you call a fortuitous event. Pero kay in delay naman ka, wala man nimo gi-deliver ang ref on time, unya ang ref nasunog, you will still be liable. Pero for example, you are supposed to deliver the ref on March 16. Pero pagka March 16, nagluto ka, nagtinanga ka, nasunog inyong balay, naapil ang ref, is that a fortuitous event? No, because that is not independent of the debtor's will. Ikaw man ang nagluto, ikaw man ang tanga, ikaw ang hinungdan sa sunog. But in this case, kung in delay nagay ka sa delivery class, di na ka ma-excuse sa fortuitous event. Liable ka sa damages. I will give you an example later. Debtor's liability is mitigated if he can prove that loss would transpire even if he had not been in default. So kung mapatunayan ni C nga pwede ra siya mapawalang sala sa pagkawala sa butang maskin pag delayed na siya, mugamay ang iyahang liability. Who do we mean gani when we say mora solvendi? That is the debtor. Okay, let us take a look at this example. B bought a car from A. So namaligya si A og car, gipalit ni B. Now, A promised to deliver a car on Tuesday. But he had a meeting, so he was not able to deliver the car. However, a tornado struck the town on Wednesday which destroyed the car. Okay, sayaon na to. Si B nagpalit og car kang A. So ingon si A, uy sige B, deliver nako na ang inyong sakyanan karong Tuesday. Pero wala na deliver ni A ang sakyanan nganuman kay na siya meeting. However, pagka Wednesday na ay tornado nag-struck sa town. Naguba ang sakyanan. Remember, kano sa dapat niya i-deliver? Tuesday. Kano sa nagka-tornado? Wednesday. Is A released from his obligation to deliver? What do you think? Di ba ma'am, ang tornado kay fortuitous event? Pero remember, in this case, in-delayed na baya siya. Kano sa niya dapat i-deliver? Martes. Kano sa nagka-tornado? Miyerkules. Is A released from his obligation to deliver? The answer is no. In an obligation to deliver a generic thing, the debtor is not relieved from liability for loss due to a fortuitous event. Nganuman, car man ang gi-order, pwede man na niya ilisan og bagong car. He can still be compelled to deliver a thing of the same kind or held liable for damages. Remember, in-delayed na siya, masking pag si tornado fortuitous event. Since in-delayed na daan si A ug ang car is a generic thing, therefore, ilisan niya ang sakyanan, liable po siya sa damages. Now, let us go to the delay of the creditor. So, what if si creditor na pod ang in delay? Delay on the part of the creditor to accept the performance of the obligation. So, for example, ningon si A kang B, huy B, i-deliver na ako imong car karong Tuesday. Pero si B man pod ang ningon nga, ay dili lang, ayon lang sa kay busy pa ko. Okay, that is what you call delay, the legal delay of the creditor. That is delay on the part of the creditor to accept the performance of the obligation. What are the requisites para makaingon tanga na ay delay of the creditor? The first one is offer of performance by a capacitated debtor. So, ningon si debtor nga, uy, mubayad na ko. The offer must be to comply with the prestation. So, kung nakay-utang, imo siyang bayaran, so you offered the creditor, huy, creditor, mubayad na ko sa kong utang. And there is a refusal of the creditor without just cause. So, niya na siya nga, ay, di lang sana akong nadawatan ni mong bayad. Mana lang siya. Nga naman, dawatan ni. Siya, ay lang kay kapig dawat. That is refusal of the creditor without just cause. So, kano sa tama kaingon nga na ay delay of the creditor or na ay mora accipiendi when there is an offer of performance by a capacitated debtor, that the offer must be to comply with the prestation and that there is refusal of the creditor without just cause. So, for example, we have A and B. So, A bought the car of B. Kinsa ni palit si A. So, ingon si B after 3 days. A, asa ka, i-deliver na nako ang kotse nga imong gipalit. And then si A, ang nagpalit, unsa ingon ni A, next week na lang, kay busy ko. Ingon si A, March 7 ba ya imong ingon nga i-deliver na nako. Nya, unsa itubag ni A, basta, ayaw sa, napamang ko new car diri. Okay, is there an offer? Yes, there is an offer to deliver. Is the subject of the obligation or the prestation valid? Yes, of course, that is the delivery of the car. Is there a refusal without just cause? Yes. Unsa ingon ni A? Basta ayaw sa napamang ko new car diri. Now here comes a tornado, a fortuitous event. Kinsa may liable, basulon ba nimo si B nga gusto naman niya i-deliver or basulon si A nga di man gusto mo dawat sa delivery? Now, what are the effects of mora accipiendi kung dili dawaton ni A ang sakyanan? The first one is that the creditor is guilty of breach of obligation nga naman, siya man ang dili gusto mo dawat. Second, the creditor is liable for damages suffered if any by the debtor. So for example, si B giingnan ni company nga, oy, ikaw bayad anak, kay wa man nimo nag-deliver. So who will pay the company? It will be A. The creditor is liable for damages suffered by B, if any. Next, the creditor bears the risk of loss of the thing due. So kung ang kotse naguba because of the tornado, when in fact gusto naman unta ni B i-deliver kang A, so A here bears the risk of loss. So kung nawala man tong kotse ha, kay naguba, napalit sa tornado, dili na to sala ni B. Where the obligation is to pay money, the debtor is not liable for interest from the time of the creditor's delay. Pero what if, for example, kuno nang hiram si A o kwarta kang B? Karon gusto na ni A bayaran si B, pero dili dawaton ni B kay gikapoy siya dawat. Where the obligation is to pay money, the debtor is not liable for interest. Kumuha na si A, B, bayaran ti ka ugma March 7. Kung maingon si B, ay dili lang ko, di alang sana sa imuha. Di ba na may interest kung mangutang kag kwarta? The interest starting March 8 until kanu sa dawaton ni creditor, dili liable si debtor ana. Dili siya dapat mobayad sa interest from that time mo ingon si creditor nga di niya dawaton ang bayad. The debtor may release himself from the obligation by consignation or deposit in court of the thing or sum due. So for example, moingon si A, B, bayaran ti kag 300,000. Ingon si B, ay lang sa kubayari. Dili man liable si A sa interest, di ba? Kaya di man niya sala nga dili dawaton ni B. So mingon si A, gusto na jud kay ko mobayad, pero di man dawaton ni B. Unsay buhaton ni A? Moadto siya sa court. Didto niya i-consign or didto niya ihatag ang bayad niya para kang B. Pag mahatag na niya dito sa court, ibig sabihin, impas na siya sa iyang obligation. Now, in reading 1169, we have here, in reciprocal obligations, neither party incurs in delay if the other does not comply or is not ready to comply in a proper manner with what is incumbent upon him. From the moment one of the party fulfills his obligation, delay by the other begins. So, unsa gani ng reciprocal obligations? Where the parties are both debtors and creditors of each other. Si A nanghiram kay B og 100,000. Pagkaugma si B ningon na pud nga A pahiram ako 100,000 B. So A is the creditor of B, B is also the creditor of A. A is the debtor of B, B is also the debtor of A. So you are both creditor and debtor of each other. So what happens in a reciprocal obligation? In reciprocal obligations, neither party incurs in delay if the other does not comply or is not ready to comply in a proper manner with what is incumbent upon him. From the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation, delay by the other begins. Now, reciprocal obligation, unsay pasabot? Obligations arise for the same cause where the parties are debtor and creditor of each other, such that the performance of one is conditioned upon the simultaneous fulfillment of the other. Delay begins from the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation. Hatagan tamog example, ha? So let us take a look at this example. We have Y and Z. So for example, niingon si Y, Z, palitan niya akong cellphone for 40,000 pesos lang. And then niingon si Z, sige, paliton ko na. The next day, niingon na po si Y, Z, paliton na nimo. Ingon si Z, ayaw sa, kay wa pa ko'y kwarta. Okay, this is what we call a reciprocal obligation. Nga naman, ihatag niya ang cellphone kung mubayad na siya. That is what we call kaliwaan ba. So this is the simultaneous fulfillment of the other. Sa kanan ako ihatag yung cellphone kung willing na kamo bayad. Now another example. Z, diara kong cellphone oh. And then niingon si Z, hala, sige, why, sunod na lang ko mo bayad. In this situation, delay begins from the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation. Unsa may gi-promise ni Y nga ihatag niya ang cellphone kang Z. Unsay promise ni Z, bayaran niya si Y, inighatag niya sa cellphone. But in this case, Z wasn't able to pay Y. Therefore, delay of the other begins because Y already fulfilled his obligation. Si C ang wala naka-fulfill. Therefore, there is delay. Delay begins from the moment one of the parties fulfills his obligation.